Buddhism says that nothing can have an independent self because everything defines everything else, as you've heard. But our everyday experience, of course, is that we do think of ourselves as being ourselves, which is not entirely wrong. What we come to understand through sitting is that the ego self in particular has been covering up our true self with the help of the three clouds of greed, anger, and delusion. This self-centeredness is what is referred to in Dogen Zenji's to carry the self forward and illuminate myriad dharmas is delusion. I talked about this last time I spoke, but I'll read it again because some people haven't heard it before. To carry the self forward and illuminate myriad dharmas is delusion. Okay. However, because in this case, we're taking care of ourselves. And then we adapt the world to take care of ourselves. That's delusion for Buddhism. However, the self in that myriad dharmas come forth and illuminate the self is enlightenment. So when that happens, when you let the world actually enlighten you, then you are the three delusions of greed, anger, and delusion aren't there anymore. They aren't in the way. Okay. So therefore, the self that the self that myriad dharmas come forth and illuminate is enlightenment, is not connected to our wants and desires. No longer being disturbed by them, what now comes to define us instead is the vexations of others that we come to care about, that we have come to care about. Often because at this stage, people have begun their own center. When not concerned with ourselves and what we once were bothered by, this still involves us with discriminating, but now about others. Though not worried about what is inside of ourselves now, those delusions, we do care for those outside of us who are still in need of help. This is a self representing our own world, but not us per se. And once we realize that this world in which others are in, like ourselves, is also empty, our attachment to it disappears, just as that to our ego self once did. Dogen Zenji called this dropping off the body and mind of self and others. The internal self is the dropping off of the body and mind of self, and the dropping off of the body and mind of others is this second self, this external self, you might say. Dogen Zenji called this, but both inside and outside are empty now. And as everything being empty as the same as nothing being empty, as everything being empty is the same as nothing being empty, Dogen finishes this section with no trace of enlightenment remains. And this no trace continues forever. One of the common phrases used for addressing Shakyamuni Buddha himself is the Tathagata, a Sanskrit word, which translates as one who is thus come, because Tata is thus, or just, as in the word thusness, or such as in suchness, and Gata is gone, similar to the Gate in gate gate paragate parasam gate bodhisvaha in the Heart Sutra, which translates as gone, gone, gone beyond, gone all the way beyond, enlightenment be praised. The Tathagata, if it is thought to be composed of not tata and gata, but tata and agata, means not often, which is come, this means come. So we can say that therefore the Tathagata, when thought of composed of these, can also be called the one who has thus come. Maybe that's the most common translation. However, not only Buddha, but everyone and everything, if not being discriminated, can be said to show thusness or suchness. This does not mean that each thing in itself has thusness or suchness, but rather that each thing, though seen before as empty, is now seen as having suchness. The arc of Buddhist practice is often represented by the formulatic expression, the mountain is a mountain, the mountain is not a mountain, the mountain is a mountain. The mountain is a mountain, the mountain is not a mountain, the mountain is a mountain. The first mountain is a mountain represents our starting to practice, and on seeing a mountain as we always have. The mountain is not a mountain is how we see a mountain in the middle of our practice, which is as being empty. The final mountain is a mountain is how we see a mountain at the end of practice as having suchness. Each thing, when freed from discrimination, is a thing as it is, as Suzuki Roshi said, which is just what it is without our thinking about it, without any thinking involved. Suchness is how things are seen when they are known to be empty. This is to say that while each thing may depend on everything else to define it, each thing is also completely independent in its thusness. No matter how close Jane and I are, for example, I can never be Jane, nor she me. Suzuki Roshi explained that there is nothing else in the world like each of us. That being so, none of us can be compared to anything else. There's nothing to compare to, okay? And so that each of us is a whole world. Another way to put this is that everyone and everything has both a relative side and an absolute side. As each of us is infinite because our nature is the same as that of all things in the world, our Buddha nature, it's a little misleading to call this nature, however, Buddhist, because it's everyone. But we do so in order to honor Shakyamuni as the one who was the first to discover that the true self of humans and everything is this nature. Generally, we don't know who we are. Limited to experience our relative reality through our five senses, we are only aware of one side of ourselves. Even Buddhists in the past tended to populate this unknown absolute with deity-like beings. But we cannot say that this was wrong of them to do so, being ourselves relative beings with no direct experience of the absolute. When beginning to practice, we were recommended to have faith in our Buddha nature. But Zazen itself is just another activity in this relative world. As we practice, whether doing it once a day or more, we are unlikely to recognize ourselves coming closer to our true selves. Nevertheless, having an enlightenment experience come out of nowhere is to realize our Buddha nature and to have a subsequent lack of self for a short while. This selfless self is what Dogen was referring to in recommending us to settle the self on the self. Right then, in settling the self on the self, the relative self and the absolute self will be one, as will practice and enlightenment as well. Okay, thank you. Let's get Jane in here. Try to get a little closer. So Jane goes over like this, maybe. Here we go. What? I'll close it. Yeah, we got something looking in the way. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anybody have any comment or questions?
You reminded me of the Donovan song. First there is a mountain, then there is no mountain, then there is.
maybe Donovan was picking up on that back in the 60s, huh? Or 70s, mostly 60s, yeah. Yes, yes. Mike.
You have to excuse me if my question is kind of confused, but your talk to me seemed to indicate that there is differentiation in life, but it's not actually what reality is. It's just what we need to use in order to go through this life. So there's a mountain, doesn't care whether we're here. It's just a mountain. But the mountain, when we study it, isn't a mountain because it's a conglomeration of conditions. And we title it mountain, and we all agree on its shape and its view. But in the end, it's still just a mountain, still sitting there, and it doesn't care what we think about it. Is that kind of part of what you were talking about?
Well, the mountain, I don't think the mountain cares in all three cases.
I'm just making a point. I don't believe mountains think. Who knows?
But yes, what I was trying to quote, differentiate, unquote, to myself, was that our version of who we are changes. But still, there are actually kind of like three selves involved. And so that difference takes place when we're over a long time while we are sitting. And so, in the case of Shakyamuni, his title was, the thus come one. And when our practice has been gone through, we also become the thus gone one, as having gone through practice, or the thus come one, which is to right now. So what opens us, which opens up in us, is this other side. This other side that we can call Buddha nature, or we can call it the absolute, or we can call it all kinds of things. But how Buddhism sees that is that when seeing form and emptiness together, you might say, that things are empty and yet at the same time they have thusness. And that thusness is absolute, while we ourselves ordinarily are relative. Oh, but I should say absolute because it's that combination of the relative and the absolute that where thusness comes into play. So we are ourselves, as always, independent of any of our thoughts about ourselves or any independent of anybody else's thoughts about ourselves. So therefore, people say, can sometimes get confused by emptiness as being something negative, but actually the end result is thusness as well as emptiness. One side of us is emptiness, the other side is thusness.
Mitch looked like he had a question. Mitch looked like for a second he had a question.
Yeah. Chris, you got a semi-perplexed look on your face.
I was trying to find the recording I made of the full moon ceremony to make everything easy later.
Oh. Okay. Hi, Mark. Haven't seen you for a long time. Mark Morris there. Yeah.
Yeah, I recently retired. My Saturdays are taken up with phone company stuff to make sure this magic happens for everyone.
Still? But
Yeah, well, I retired, so
okay.
my Saturdays are free. Yay.
Yeah, but you'll be doing politics again, won't you?
Oh, I don't know. I may
You're retired from
that mountain may have like dissolved. I'm not sure.
We don't know it, but Mark is within the Democratic Party is kind of well known, I think. He knows the names and they know him. Anyway, welcome back. Welcome back.
I know where the embarrassments are buried.
Yeah. Well, don't tell us. Don't tell us. Anybody else have any comments about this? I think my talk may have been a little difficult. Anyway, and Michelle.
Michelle?
Yes, Michelle. Have we met before?
No, hello.
No.
This is my first time.
Where do you live?
Right now, I live in Van Nuys,
Okay. Oh, you're near us then.
but
Yeah.
I relocated from Fairfax up north, so I was happy to find out you were affiliated with the San Francisco Zen Center.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah, that's where we came from.
Mhm.
Yeah, Jane and I met at Tassajara, right in the beginning of things. Yeah, so we're one of the affiliates. Yeah, so welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to
I do
LA.
have a question.
Yes, please.
I don't know if this is convoluting things, but you were talking about the mountain and, being on one side and then the mountain and then being on the other side. So I started to think about time and space. And as we move through our practice in time and space, we sense who we are. But as the changes start happening to our consciousness, we then become empty because we're kind of one with everything eventually. But then again, we become back to ourselves because that's where it's all coming from. Does that make sense?
That's true. That's what it is. That's what it is. Yeah, yeah. But now we have a much fuller understanding of ourselves and others. Yeah. So we kind of brings back the wonder to the world.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Anybody else? Stephen, yes, Mike.
There we go. Maybe I'm off here on this. It kind of reminds me of the ox herding picture again. You're in life, you go out and find your path and everything. And at the end of it all, you're right back where you started again. But it's not quite the same as it was, but it all appears the same and you're back into the same, life and reality and stuff. And the practice teaches us how to look at the same reality that we left with a different eye and a different understanding. But in the end, we still have to go back to it and still interact with it as life goes along.
That's exactly right. Yep. That's what it is. Yeah. 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 I
Mitch,
forgot.
Mitch, do you have a question? You looked for a minute like you had a question there earlier.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you know me. My mind's always going. So no, I really don't have a question. Thank you.
Okay. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody.